Thank you very much, Priyakshi. I think Anish has made a fabulous presentation and gave a very right starting point for all of us. So, as all of us are aware that in this panel discussion, we have Vikram Handa, who is representing Epsilon Carbon. Then we have Harin representing Neogen, and then Anjani Maurya, who represents the Altmin. Now we will go deeper into understanding the nitty-gritties of the choices and the challenges what we have related to anode, cathode, and electrolyte manufacturing in India, and try to understand mostly about the current changes and what's the current status around these component manufacturing. In previous presentation, we also saw several numbers around, the cost contributions, the localization status, and probably the future roadmap what India should have. So let me begin with Anjani asking about Anjani, as we all understand that the cathode has a the large part of making India's ambition going towards 60% of the local value addition related to batteries. So, and we have been hearing about your investment of $100 million in cathode material manufacturing. So what are the critical success factors for scaling the production in India while ensuring global competitiveness? And I would like you to keep your focus on the recent developments as well, because we have been tracking this development around these industries, but it seems progress India is making is at a very slow pace. So what are the challenges and how we can overcome those challenges? Over to you, Anjani.
Thanks, Preetesh, and thanks to EVreporter for having us here today. While you asked a very lengthy question, I won't take much of time. I'll try to keep it simple for the audience as well. So first of all, 100 million investment that you mentioned is phased out in a manner to be able to execute upwards of about 10 gigawatt hours by 2030. Initially, we are looking at doing about half of that. In Hyderabad, we are expected to come in probably in the next 18 months to produce LFP cathode materials and supply. Coming to the Indian production, and when you say it is slow, I don't think the material manufacturers are slow. I think Mr. Harin will also agree with me, and if Vikram was already here, he'll also agree that we think, some people used to tell us that we are very late, we'll be too late for the market. But now we feel that we're too early in the market, because it is the cell manufacturers who have to decide on the technology, on the raw material needs, qualify the materials. It's a discussions they are undergoing, and once they let us know, we will be in a place to supply that before they need it.
Okay, great. So yeah, so Anjani, just a follow-up question. I understand probably you're trying to say that component manufacturers are probably
ahead,
are not late, they are in much before the cell manufacturing happening in India.
100%.
So what is your perspective about, let's say, these companies are advancing much before then the cell manufacturing becomes reality in India? Obviously, there are announcements and some updates happening about it.
The industry together has to address the issue for the greater good. And I think although cell manufacturers are announcing and they're coming and they're working towards it, in the earlier presentation that Anish made, we've also seen that some are already commissioned, some are commissioning. But the basic fact remains that all these cell manufacturers are either dependent on a supply chain from outside India only. There is no complete supply chain in India. Even if there is any, unless they can be any number of people like me or Mr. Harin or anyone for that sake, Neogen or Altmin or GFL or anyone or Epsilon, we could manufacture and give. But it is the cell manufacturers who need to tell us what exactly is required I think that that journey of learning has passed, and now people are getting on board. But I think India is in actual terms not later than anyone else, because apart from uh, China, no one is ready with these capacities other than Korea and other people. But those are all internally consumed already. So we are within the time, but it is
Great,
only
great,
the policy that
great.
needs to get into place.
Correct, correct. Again, one more question I would like to ask from you, uh, related to challenges of cathode manufacturing in India. I'll keep my focus on cathode manufacturing. I was doing, preparation before for this discussion. Some of the challenges I could understand are, like, let's say, lack of clarity of demand, which means the chemistry of the battery is not clear. Cathodes are dependent on cell chemistry. There are many gray areas for cathode manufacturing to estimate even cathode demand. Then there is lack of government push and schemes, because even the PLI scheme focuses on the batteries, not the upstream value chain. So none of the Indian policies schemes focus on cathode manufacturing. Maybe some of there at state level. So most of the incentives are offered to cell manufacturers. So, and you need to commit huge investments, for cathode production. Then there is also a lack of technical expertise, availability of raw materials. Obviously, companies like yours are building capability. So your views about these 3 points: lack of clarity of demand, lack of government push and schemes, and lack of technical expertise or availability of raw materials.
So there is a lot of clarity on what the demand could be, what the chemistry could be,
Mm-hmm.
and there, people are going ahead. People have tied up with the technologies. It's the OEMs. Everything boils down to one point: is which chemistry you need and what price are you getting at. And
Mm-hmm.
this given time, everyone, even the cell manufacturers, need to be understanding, which is a challenge for us, that you can't be supplying material at SMM prices, because when you're trying to get away from that supply chain, you have to first stop benchmarking yourself to that. You have to look at your country's, availability of materials, the costings and other things, and then
Mm-hmm.
take into consideration. And in addition, I was at a recent meeting, and there we were looking at, apart, government is doing good. Government is supporting. Obviously, it's a learning curve, so they've given a incentive PLI scheme for the cell manufacturers, hoping it will be passed down. But since it is not being passed down, they are coming out with their own version for the components, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take time. It's early stages, so it will come out in time. But it is the cell manufacturers who need to give us the requirements, quality, and understand that price can be in comparative with Chinese prices, or what do you call, SMA indexes or anything like that. But it has to be realistic. Long run,
Right.
you can't have a unreliable supply chain with unrealistic prices, and you can't expect to survive as an industry. The cell industry also will get into crisis should anything happen on one end. And there's an incentive example. It's good that everyone's effort paid out, and government has exempted basic custom duty on critical minerals. But they bought in some regulation which gives a cell manufacturer 7% exemption on import of battery materials,
Mm-hmm.
components. Now they get the benefit of that, and it becomes a problem to a component manufacturer.
Yeah, that's great. Uh, I'll move to Vikram. Vikram, in terms of anode manufacturers, and I think if I talk about the anode manufacturing in India, uh, mostly companies are eyeing the global markets to secure demand and also eventually setting up the supply for domestic market when the demand increases. So I think the steps probably your company is also taking is going global with battery manufacturing approvals, export-led demands, and then when Indian battery manufacturing picks up, then you probably are very well placed to supply anodes for companies making cells in India. My question to you is that Epsilon is working to localize probably anode manufacturing in India, and what are the challenges do you foresee in scaling up? Is it like only unavailability of demand currently at domestic level, or it is also to do with critical battery components and how probably policies or incentives can further support it?
Yeah, thanks, Preetesh. So, so we are looking to build a facility here in India. I would say 2 years ago, we were thinking of building as a first phase a 10,000 ton a year plant for synthetic graphite. We have since reevaluated our plans and decided to build a 30,000 ton plant in first phase. One of our learning was, China at one stage builds a 100,000 ton plant. So at 10,000 tons a year, you're not capex efficient to build and then compete also. So one of the challenges in India is like that large volume customer is not ready. So somewhere we have to compromise and build at a certain scale that we can afford to build and sell. And we think the market is coming. It's about 3 to 4 years out in our opinion. So, but we don't want to wait till then. We want to build in India and export. So this is where in the last few years we focused more on qualifying with global cell players and exporting. And so we want to build in India, first focus on them. And by the time India picks up, focus on them. So if you look at 30,000 tons, we would allocate something like 8 to 10,000 tons to 2 or 3 players in India. 20,000 we would lock up with a large player outside India. And then slowly move that order book to local sources, and India would become more for India. One of the challenges to building this industry in India also, it's large capex. They're actually very good state incentives. I think people don't recognize the efforts states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana are doing to attract investments in the battery supply chain. So they are encouraging investment, and as per industrial policy, they're willing to go a little over and above to attract such high potential industries. So while we discuss a lot of national level incentives, there's some good state level incentives that can be negotiated. At the same time, there is need for more support, and there is need for customers to commit. So I would say the biggest challenge today is while the volume of Indian customers is not there, but a lot of Indian customers are not mature enough to start qualifying material suppliers. They don't have that level of understanding. So they're going for the easiest source, which is maybe a very well-established Chinese player who has been supplying for the last 10 years. So I think that customer maturity is coming slowly. They have to be more confident and know what they want and know how to optimize their cell chemistry. And then they will jointly work with material suppliers in India to make the products that they need.
Yeah, I agree, Vikram, that more and more clarity, even with the cell companies, is going to ease out how they are going to eventually source the further components and how to utilize Indian companies. You also touched upon, Vikram, the challenges, right? For example, the scale and maybe the cost competitiveness. So I think achieving economies of scale and cost competitiveness still remains a challenge for Indian manufacturer, especially when you are comparing it to the established player in countries like China and other parts of the world. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you are going global and targeting US and European market. So uh, I mean, and there are at the same time there are established players from especially from China and some other countries. So I mean, how do you think any Indian company can go global, and what are the opportunities they can actually tap the market? So like, is it a obviously volumes are there. Probably we have better pricing, etc. also. But do you think credential wise and the technology advancements and those kind of challenges still are there, which you get as a questions from your potential customers?
Yeah, so you see, technology is a big differentiator, and it's got nothing to do with being Indian, Korean, or American as such. I think as a company, when you're focused in a space and costs are coming down and technology is evolving, you have to be ahead in the technology curve. So I think that's one place where I can proudly say Epsilon positions itself. When we look at anode materials of fast charging or long range,
Mhm.
safety, these are the main requirements of customers. And we think we are really top of the top tier when it comes to such things. So the reason we have gone global, I would say, is customers have pushed us. When we try to break into companies, say 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of the conversation is, no, we want localization, we want localization. So we
Right.
first went to Finland, we have a joint venture partner there. And then last year we announced this project in the US, which is currently under permitting. And we see CapEx is higher, OpEx is higher, definitely in the US. But I think the market is such where the customers are willing to pay for a local solution. I think compared to, cathode is similar to anode, but these are not technologies that are licensable and someone, if he has the capital, can build the plant. So all the IP is homegrown. So there are huge barriers to entry if you want to commercialize in the next 2 to 3 years. We've been at it for 6 years now. So it just takes time.
Yes.
I think when I look at India being our home ground, we understand it well. Uh, I can say we are at the same cost of production as the Chinese. So if China is producing at X, we can produce as X. The only difference is China is willing to sell at X minus 10%. We cannot sell below X. We have to make money to make return on our investments and pay back banks. So that's a shift which is there between China and rest of the world. And maybe that's what differentiates us. But a 100,000-ton plant and a 30,000-ton plant, your operating cost doesn't change more than 2%, in my opinion. So it's not like a large plant is getting you very efficient in OpEx. A large plant is making you more CapEx efficient with certain sizing of equipments. But OpEx wise, you are very, very competitive. So it's more about, subsidies and can you work at lower margins and still hit your IRR. So I think that's the biggest differentiator out of us and the Chinese anode maker.
Yes, Vikram, actually, I was planning to ask this policy-related question later, but I think you have brought it. So the production cost probably can be similar with Indian and Chinese players. But I think in China, you get more incentives. Even sometimes your employees or the R&D staff of some part of it also paid by, the government incentives. So that is why, and then the exports incentives, etc. So that is what it makes them to tap the global markets and kind of dominate it. So what has been your ask from state governments and the central government to also consider a PLI sort of scheme or any other particular scheme which at least gives the boost in the beginning?
Yeah, so I actually like I mean, at a state level, I think CapEx incentive, I'm again talking just anode. CapEx incentive is important, and power cost, which is a big raw material for us, are the two important things we look at. So this is what we try to negotiate either with the government or in a PPA with a private player to get a low cost of power, or we also generate our own power. So these are the areas we look at when we negotiate. I think from a PLI scheme, I have a very different approach. I like the idea more of a PLI scheme like FAME, which is saying, you build the plant, you cut an invoice, you get a benefit. So I think that
Right.
brings a lot of focus into, you have to develop IP or license IP if possible, or do JVs, qualify with customers, build a plant and sell. So your clear goalpost is localize manufacturing in India, and the government will give you a benefit. I think getting a benefit upfront is a little challenging from a government policy point of view. From a central point, maybe at a state level, we have seen where you can get some money pari passu. But from a central point of view, I think the first guy to build, sell, and having qualified with customers should get the benefit because he's really focused on building the supply chain. But I'm sure my other panelists have a lot of opinions on this also.
Yeah. I will definitely take their opinion as well. Thank you very much, Vikram. I will move to Harin now. Harin, thank you very much for joining the panel today. And although the production of electrolytes for lithium-ion batteries in India is still, at a very early stages, there is growing interest from domestic and international companies, but I think still it is at a very early stages. And so I have first, I would like to understand what is the status of currently the the electrolyte manufacturing in India, part one. And the part two of my question will be related to availability of raw materials. Let's say if I talk about salt, maybe sodium chloride. So salt for electrolyte production is available in India. as per my understanding. Sourcing salt from local supplier may be difficult due to local, maybe competition. Then the solvent, battery grade solvents, EMC, DMC are not procured in India and should be imported. Only commercial grade solvents are probably available in India. Then the additives, which are also difficult to procure, produce locally and have to be imported. So in view of this, if you break down this into technology, raw material, processing, then how do you see overall, number one, overall status of the electrolyte manufacturing in India? And then second, if you talk about the raw material availability issues to begin with. Harin, you are on mute. If you can please unmute.
Hi, sorry. Thanks for having me and thanks for this opportunity. I think when I look at electrolyte, actually, I feel very positive about it. So, for example, we already have we started making electrolyte last 2 years. So, when Indian cell producers were doing their R&D or they were starting a small 10 megawatt facility or something like that, we already for last 2 years have been giving them electrolytes. So when they wanted few kgs, we are giving them few kgs. When their demand shifted to few tens of kgs about a year ago, we were able to give tens of kgs, hundreds of kgs, like, couple of months back. And now last 5, 6 months, we are making thousands of kgs. So like couple of metric tons, right? The capacity that we have built, the plant is ready to make 2000 metric ton. We are doing some debottlenecking. So let's say on a NMC basis, it can support 4 gigawatt hour of NMC, or it can support 2 giga of LFP. On an NMC LFP kind of average basis, around 3 to 4 gigawatt hour of production of electrolyte can be made in India, right? And the quality of the electrolyte that we have made, the feedbacks that we've gotten from customer, so it's at par. So of course, so they've looked at the quality which is coming from China, from Korea, and Japan, and they found our electrolyte to be at par or sometimes even better. Also, as Vikram mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of technology development which happens. So in case of electrolyte, also, of course, there is how to like make the electrolyte is one part, but what should be the recipe of the electrolyte? What composition will give the beneficial, performance of the cells, especially in the India circumstance. So especially as you know, the rest of the world is very cold. Like most of the cells are tested at 25 degrees Celsius, but India needs a good performance at 40 degrees Celsius. So I think last 2 years, we got a lot of insights working closely with our customers of what kind of electrolytes will give good performance. And that is what allowed, that some of them have found our electrolyte to perform even better than what they are getting internationally. So I think electrolytes, we are in good hands. So even if, let's say, earlier we said around 1.26 gigawatt hour of cell production capacities are coming online. Electrolyte, there's already 2 to 3 giga already ready. And we have already started constructing a 30,000 metric ton plant, which again, depending on the ratios that you think, our understanding is if it's a mix of LFP and NMC, approximately you would need 1000 metric tons per giga. So you can support up to 30 gigawatt hour of production. Also, so that would be ready by end of December. So we already started the civil construction at our end, and we have a technology license from Mitsubishi, who's one of the world's oldest and most reputed electrolyte makers. So their subsidiary Mitsubishi Engineering, sorry, group company Mitsubishi Engineering, who built the plant of Mitsubishi in US, UK, and China, are the ones who are building our plant as well in parallel. And by the time our civil work is ready by middle of next year, that plant will also come here, get installed, tested. So by end of 2000, like second half of 2025, in India, we would have ability to make around 30 gigawatt hours of electrolyte to support 30 gigawatt hour of cell manufacturing. So therefore, as we were looking at India numbers, also the site which we have constructed, although we'll start with a 30, but can very easily expand up to 100 gigawatt hours. So the facility and the common infra will be ready. But as we see more and more visibility, we can keep increasing. So I think, honestly speaking, I feel when it comes to electrolyte, there's enough capacity available. Like the Indian cell manufacturers will not have to wait for electrolyte capacity to come online. I mean, we have been having the facility before they needed. Since last 2 years, we are ahead. One of the main reason in this is, unlike anode and cathode, like electrolyte is something which is usually locally produced, locally consumed. Shelf life is very low, and depending on some of the components, you also require low temperatures. That's why it has to be local. So we didn't have an option. I mean, we had to be before, if the cell production has to happen in a seamless way. The customers also recognize that, and that's why they are also keen to localize this component the first. And I think that has basically encouraged Neogen to set up these capacities. So I think that's on the electrolyte part. Then you mentioned, some challenges related to raw materials, raw material availability. So actually, when we say electrolyte salt, it's not sodium chloride, it's some lithium salt. So there are one or two lithium salts, lithium hexafluorophosphate, LiPF6 or LiFSI. So these are the main components of the electrolyte. So by weight, it's around 10 to 15%. By value, it's about 50-60% of the value of the electrolyte. So in parallel to electrolyte getting made, we are also making salt for that. And fortunately, right now, 95% of the salt is made in China and exported world over. So the customers are really not insisting that you have to set up the salt manufacturing locally. They are ready to accept salt manufacturing from India. So then, actually, if you see our salt manufacturing capacity in terms of gigawatt hour is much higher than our electrolyte capacity. So like by end of this year, we would have only 2 gigawatt hour of electrolyte capacity, 2 to 3 giga. But at a salt, we would already have a 30 gigawatt hour. And in the phase two, which is coming by end of 2025, we would have something which can support 50-55 gigawatt hour of salt. Because we are seeing a very strong interest from the international customer, not only in India, but international customers who want an alternate to China. Because they are a little bit worried, if 95% of the salt is basically coming only from China. What if tomorrow China stops supply? So that worry is very real. And they want to have an alternate. And most of the international customers, instead of just looking at SMM or something, they are basically saying, outside China, are you the cheapest? Okay, so fortunately for salts, there is only one company so far in Japan and Korea. And after that, India is where, we guys are starting. And, you saw in the earlier presentation, GFL is starting. So we are literally like number 3 and number 4 outside China facility from where they can get. And, just based on the geography, the ability to expand further. So even though like in the new site, we'll have around 3,000 tons of salt production, electrolyte salt production. The approvals we have to go up to 30,000, 40,000 tons. So we like the international customers also can see that we can scale up fast. The operating cost outside China, or is operating cost is almost similar. Like Vikram said, because of capex, interest costs versus China's approach versus, we want to have at least some bare minimum profit. So I think this is the only approach. And when the customers are looking from security of supply, they see very good interest in buying from salt. So we have already electrolyte, enough needed for India. Of course, electrolyte capacities that we are targeting is only from India. But the salt, we are looking at a more global outlook or global view. And we have seen a very strong interest from US, Japan, as well as Europe to some extent, who are keen to buy this salt from us. You also mentioned about solvent. So the approach that we've taken is that especially when our 30 gigawatt hour facility comes up, as you said, only technical grade is available. So we have a facility which can purify and convert a technical grade into battery grade. So there are already 2 or 3 solvents which are available, and more will be available by 2026-27. Similarly, even on additives, there are already 2 companies which are working on organic additives. So all the lithium additives we can make ourselves. So additives, you can broadly say 2 parts: lithium additives and organic additives. So lithium additives we can make on our own. We already have many more technologies which we've not scaled up. As we see which additives are getting more popular from India point of view, we can add those capacities. and even organic additives. There are two manufacturers which are already making for global supply chain. So we have availability of them. So I think we can achieve a fair degree. I think the only thing which is from a volume perspective, solvent capacities need to come up if we want to be like completely free of China. But I think since we are purifying the solvent to battery grade ourselves, we have many options in the Middle East as well as India from where we can supply for the electrolyte requirements. So that's my view on, electrolyte salt and supply chain.
No, thank you very much. Really amazing to know that at least, I mean, if I conclude the discussion, the initial discussion around electrolyte, anode, and cathode, it seems that capacity building is not a challenge. The bigger challenge is probably the capacity building from the cell manufacturing supply side. And especially talking about electrolytes, availability of salts, solvents, and additives. I think it makes a very good use case even for the global companies to take from a company like yours. My just a follow-up question to you is that, let's say, cell manufacturing is being incentivized in India mainly to kind of have the local value addition of the 60% which we target, right?
Yeah.
60% of the local value addition. Now, in
Yes.
previous presentation, also we saw the cost breakdown of anode, cathode, electrolyte, and other part of the value chain, right?
Yes.
So eventually, in order to achieve that 60%, if I consider that as a direct and indirect localization, then I think electrolyte also has to play a major role. So out of entire, supply, how much is the really localized in India? Because I'm sure things are imported also as well for electrolytes. So I'm not considering the
Sure.
machine, all those things, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so in case of electrolyte, so like I said about solvent, similarly on the lithium side, what Neogen is doing that we are buying just a simple technical grade lithium, so we don't require a very high purity or something. Then there are 3, 4 stages of purification of lithium, then subsequent conversion into a simple salt, then making the electrolyte salt. So since all the processing is being done from Neogen, like within India from Neogen side. So practically, if you look at the entire electrolyte, you would only have some lithium and some like which is coming out, which will come as an imported component. And and the solvent currently, but as I said, once the technical production in India picks up, so we see around 60-70% value addition already, which we can see happening in India. And as we go to like more and more solvent gets made, and once we move there, we can even go as high as 75, 80, 85%, depending on again price, right? Like you can have value addition happen in India.
So if I can say like minimum, probably approximately 60% is already there, and maximum we can go to 80 to 85%, right?
Yeah.
And then see what makes is a bigger challenge is probably mainly the lithium. And I was looking at some of the LinkedIn posts of Mr. Vikram, and he
Mm.
talked about China halting critical mineral exports like graphite, and and how probably India, if India can also see such situations, then there is going to be a problem. So your viewpoint around that, right? This problem is really very challenging to solve, right? Lithium anyway has to be imported, or
Yeah.
do you see the explorations becoming reality in Jharkhand, Jammu and Kashmir, and some part of the Rajasthan in India, and how they will impact in case they become real in India? What's your view?
So I think, one good thing which we were very lucky that we've been working with lithium for last 40 years, since 1985. But
Oh,
we were
nice.
working for non-battery applications for lithium. So we've seen, the different phases of lithium mining, how it started in 85 with only 2 mines in the world, one in US and Europe. Then we started seeing Australia trying to challenge them. And then suddenly, this the South America, the Chile, Argentina basically come from nowhere and like basically stop all the what is called spodumene based mining, and then ruling for last 20-25 years. And then
Mm.
again, last 2016-17 onwards, once the world started becoming again wanting more batteries. I mean, batteries becoming so prominent application that again Australia again become getting some dominance, and the spodumene-based mines also basically becoming more and more important. But,
Mm.
to be very honest, like if I look at that 30, 40 years, there was always overcapacity available in lithium. So honestly, nobody was looking for lithium desperately because in 5 years, 10 years, your overall demand would hardly increase by 30%, 40%. That was very low growth rate. And there was enough capacity which was available in a very rich resource in Chile, Argentina, where, SQM would just do some debottlenecking and they can take care of world's 5 years additional lithium capacity. So
Mhm.
therefore, nobody looked at lithium very strongly. Now that they've looked, we are finding at many places. Honestly, again, I'm not worried here from China point of view because the biggest and the best source is Chile and Argentina. And the companies which are operating there, like of course, China is also now going a little bit into Argentina, but the established companies who've been there for 30, 40 years, which are some of the world's biggest miners, they can completely produce it China free. There is some dependency to make a battery grade lithium for cathode application, but for a regular lithium consumption like what we require, there's very limited China. So we can completely be free of China supply chain, when it comes. I think to add to this, so now Australia became another source. And for last 7, 8 years, a lot of Australian lithium ore was going to China for refining. But now there are some refining which is already happening which is happening already in Australia, and also US and Europe are also setting up lithium refining capability. So I think lithium is slightly better condition as compared to graphite anode, where there's a lot of I heard like 90-95% dependency, and maybe I think Vikram can say a little bit more if there are alternate sources where I'm sure there are China free options available there as well with the right investment. But I think lithium, there is a lot. Specifically to answer your question, related to India lithium. So,
Mhm.
the JNK or Jharkhand lithium. So, what today lithium that we have found, it's relatively a little bit poorer source based on the limited information I have as compared to the best source which you have in Chile, Argentina, and then followed by the sources which you have in Australia and Canada. So if the lithium prices go really high, where there is real shortage, people would actively go ahead and use those mines and try to refine it even at a higher cost. But in a normal condition, unless we find more such sources which are richer, because we also just started looking, right? So maybe we
Right.
found something which can take care of, okay, if lithium goes to $40, $50 per kg kind of lithium carbonate price, but on a normal like $15-20 lithium prices, maybe we still need to keep looking for more richer mines or a better refining technology which can basically refine at a lower cost the existing lithium that we have in JNK or Jharkhand.
That's understood. Understood. Thank you very much. So, for a electrolyte manufacturing, probably lithium is not that a big challenge, and I think this breaks, the kind of thought or the fear factor which we in general we have the opinion of that we always have to dependent on China for such critical materials. Vikram, I want to take your opinion as well on this topic. Related to the recent news about China halting critical material exports like graphite. And how should India and US collaborate to secure the diversity and diversify their EV battery supply chains? And what that is part one of the question. And second part is what role Indian companies like yours can play in these partnerships?
Yeah, so I think I've been talking about this for 2 years and sounds
Yes.
a bit like a broken tape recorder when I talk to either Indian government or even customers outside China to say that why aren't you focusing on graphite? It's very, very highly concentrated. What is your plan B?
Yes.
We have 4 approved suppliers from China. We're very comfortable, right? Last
Mhm.
year, I think July, October, you saw some export restrictions on graphite. Then you see
Right.
further things happen, I think earlier this month or late last month. So what I see happening, if I was a cell producer, and like Harin was saying, if I need lithium, I have options. I can go to Australia, I can go to South America, I can go to Africa even. There are a lot of options. I might have to pay 10-15% more in certain geographies. Right.
Mm.
If I want cathode also, I can go to Korea, I can go to BSF, Umicore. I have options. at least for NMC, right? Electrolyte, fewer options, but usually they end up localizing close to them. They're very clear to localize that. But if it's graphite, even if I want to pay double the price, there is no supplier B. The only natural graphite capacity today is POSCO or 80,000 tons, which is locked up, and Syra in the US at 11,000. So that really isn't enough. Now the Chinese are building plants in Indonesia, but still Indonesia is not solving a global problem. And today we have, I would say, the entire graphite supply is just focused on 4 or 5 Chinese companies that really make a tier one product, which EVs require, especially in Europe, North America. So it's so concentrated, and in the last year, you see a couple of these companies financially struggling also. So imagine 3 or 4 companies have to supply the whole world. Everybody continues to build gigafactories, especially in the US, and India is just taking off. So where will graphite come from? I think it's again lack of awareness, and means it's very clear that China is saying, look, you can keep building factories and you think you localize, but if you don't have graphite, what's going to, like, there's no replacement. So either you focus and really attract investment and technology and say this is critical and build it, or you're always dependent. We have actually seen this export restrictions play out now already. We see this happening in the US where they continue to supply. It just takes a little bit more time for paperwork. But I've heard firsthand actually that when it comes to India, a lot of Chinese anode makers are saying, sorry, I cannot export to India. You want 1 kg, I'll give you. You want 5 tons or 20 tons, I don't get a license. So 1 kg, 2 kgs qualifies you. That's great. You're in the approved supplier. But when you want 10 tons or 1,000 tons, 1,000 tons is 1 gigawatt as nothing. No? Sorry, no export license. So it's not even a price discussion. So I think this urgency will come to customers, and it takes too long to build an anode plant and to qualify. So it takes few years to qualify, 2 years to build a plant. So I think this is something where in the next, say, I wouldn't even give it 6 months. I would say in the next 2 months, you'll see this play out where you'll see huge focus and huge protectionism come to localize graphite supply chain, especially in the US. They really recognize this as being critical. India is, I think, still looking at battery materials as one. They're not really picked on one material, whether it's electrolyte or cathode or anode, to say this is the most important and what we should do. But again, you see this play out in other countries, and slowly, the other say regions also pick up. So I think the US will lead this effort to say how to really develop a local supply chain, how to incentivize, how to put tariffs, and then you'll see India maybe do something similar.
So a lot, I mean, before I ask this question, why, Vikram, Chinese companies are not really interested in exporting to India? At the same time, they are doing it with other countries.
So they see US as a great market. It's a huge market. It wants hundreds of thousands of tons. So they don't want to let go of such a market that is, they can really say, get entrenched into. I think when it comes to India, it's partly geopolitical. India also has certain, opinions about investments from China. So China says, why should I support? So it's not, by the way, it's not only graphite, it's also restrictions on technology. It's around cell technology, around battery material technology. If I want to go do a joint venture with someone in China, they might not be able to export to me, like do a joint venture with me in India. But if I want to build the same plant in the US, they might be allowed to do a joint venture with me. So that is also being controlled. So it's not just material supply. It's about, look, there are very few people that have technology in the world today. And if you want to do a joint venture, they are being restricted. So my take on this at least is that there's huge overcapacity in China, and the Chinese say, listen, don't worry, we're there to supply you, but we're there to supply you cells and cars. We're not there to supply you technology and battery materials and make you independent. We're happy to give you that. And that's the kind of, you can clearly see policy pushing that. It's now to be seen what everybody else, how they react to that.
Right. So even geopolitical challenges are also the real challenges, right, Vikram? Because definitely there are ways by which India can ensure some level of availability. There are investments happening, few joint ventures happening, but the really technology transfer is not happening. So something like graphite, if India has to build a capability, so it requires a lot of innovation, technology development. As you suggested, probably US will focus holistically around building the capability around it. So maybe uh, some kind of collaboration with a US company might work in future. Obviously, initially with the global meeting global demands and then coming to India. Is my understanding correct?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Anjani, very similar question to you. Cathode materials also rely heavily on critical raw materials like lithium, nickel, cobalt. Um, Harin talked about, right? Lithium grade for electrolyte probably is not a problem, but maybe it's a challenge for batteries for the cathodes, right? So, in your opinion, at national level, what strategies should India adopt to secure a stable and sustainable supply chain for these resources in the face of global competition? Number one.
So,
Second, are you doing something specific which automatically in your cathode technology reduces the challenges around critical raw material sourcing?
So I think technology-wise, everyone would agree that the composition remains the same. The quality and the individual customer specification differs. So technology-wise, we are also partnering, looking for partners here and there, apart from what we have to meet individual customers' demands, because they're licensing this technology from certain cell companies, and their technology license complies them to look at those particular cell tech or material suppliers as well. So coming down to lithium, I guess I agree with Harin that lithium is available in technical grade in large quantities. The whole of South America is also there, but battery grade becomes a problem. Even we have access to a lot of lithium carbonate, but battery grade lithium carbonate is what we would be requiring. So we are and ensuring that to give a certain price, probably some customers would ask, okay, you can take it from China. But to address a larger question, I think we are trying to build a supply chain outside China, where we get it from South American countries, including Brazil and Bolivia. We are also doing a project in Brazil where we'll be refining about refining and producing about 6,000 initially, but reaching about 32,000 tons of lithium carbonate in the next 2 years. So that is what we're doing, and Government of India has been supporting it. They've placed our project under the Mineral Security Partnership as India's first project. So there is support. Refining in India, I think it depends. If every company needs to depend upon investors and etc. If we are depending on external investors, and Vikram will understand it better because he's looking at it outside as well. Many of the sovereign wealth funds or funds and everyone want you to be ESG compliant. So getting spodumene like thing into India by ocean freight from locations like Australia, Brazil, here and there, and refining it in India, I don't think we'll be able to match their ESG norms. So
Mm.
it is best to get refined lithium like minerals into the country. I think other nickel, cobalt, etc. I think are available not from the mines. Also, I don't know how compatible they are into the battery material manufacturing from recycling, but I think if recycling is going strong, that will be able to address that issue.
Yeah, that's true. Anjani, you have been talking about, localization of the cathodes, which your company is planning to manufacture in India. Let's assume at commercial, when it becomes at the commercial level, uh, in India, what's going to be the kind of actual level of localization? Is it like mainly things are imported because the cathode is the largest cost contributor in the cell? So, what is the localization levels India can achieve at direct and indirect level? And
So
what's
I think
your
come 2030, cathodes, we are not the only one. Epsilon is there, and many other companies are also announced. But we're making. I know from talking to Epsilon also that they are advanced with the facilities in Moosburg and etc. And we've also come to a certain place in the journey, and I think it will get localized completely. I can't comment on NMC because I have limited knowledge there, but LFP, LMFP, these things, I think there will be enough production to support the Indian market, because it is just replicating, and if we've solved the current supply chain, just replicating would not be a problem.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Anjani. I want to keep last 10 minutes for questions. We have some questions. Before I open it for Q&A, I would like to take your opinion, starting with Vikram, in terms of the two things, because the focus of today's webinar is understanding about the recent developments, or maybe the development what happened in the last 1 year. So, Vikram, I want you to talk about first part is the latest positive developments which has happened around maybe anode and cathode manufacturing in India. And second is uh, any policy suggestions, maybe two, which you want to give and any government should consider to adopt that. So first part is latest technology, latest developments, and second part is policy suggestions.
Yeah, thanks, Preetesh. So I think one good development in the last year is that there is an actual customer. There are two actual customers in India producing cells, so that's a positive sign. You have Nash Energy and Ola, two customers that are actually buying and producing cells. So that's a first step in the right direction. I think from a policy side, so more than policy support, I think what we need is customer support, right? Customer commitments, customer alignment to buy domestically and develop local suppliers. Now, how can policy facilitate that without creating challenges for customers either, right? They also need to be competitive in today's market. Some have
Yes.
subsidies, some don't. But to create an ecosystem where maybe it's short-term pain, but long-term gain, so whether it's for battery material company who has to sell at lower margin so that a local customer buys, but in the long run with your scale, you are doing well and he's also gotten a localized supply chain. I think a policy framework, ACC PLI is great. FAME is great. I think there's been a lot of discussion around the battery materials policy. I think it's moving in the right direction where the government has a clear intention to do it. It's to be seen how it plays out in the next few months. But definitely the intention is there, and they're giving a lot of thought on how to make a good frame or good policy.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Vikram. Harin, I would like to take your opinion also in view of electrolyte manufacturing. The latest you talked about several developments, but if you can summarize the latest developments in last 1 year, mainly the positive ones, and the policy suggestions, if you would like to give to the policymakers.
No, I think again the biggest thing that as a supplier you would want is to have customers. So we are happy that two customers have already started, and there's a visibility that two more will start in next 1 year. They are developing quite well, and 2 to 3 more will come online by 5 years. So when you are building a plant, there are at least 4 or 5 customers. So I think that's a positive sign. I would also say that we've seen in last 1 year. Good interest from the international customers for our electrolyte salt and additives. So not only us, but the other guys who are also working in electrolyte additives. So there is a very strong interest from the international community to have a decoupling from China. So that allows us to build capacities for the international customers as well, at least for the major components, cost contributors, and then that helps with the localization and reducing dependence on China. On the second side, what we can help government, I completely agree with Vikram that, uh, if they can give us a PLI where we can then work with a lower margins or lower price to the customers. So as we scale up.
Yeah, I think these things
Yeah.
important. The
Yes.
customers and the international interest, mainly part of the decoupling, as you mentioned, and the PLI for upstream. Harin, in case you want to add a few more.
Yeah, I think the only other thing which government can also support is how can they support export? So when we are targeting India as a base for export, So in the past, there would be export incentive, 3%, 5% product base. So something like that, if they can restart, like, we have that road tap mechanism, which gives, so as we used to sell chemicals in the past, and the percentage benefit would range from 0.5% to 3%, depending on time where they wanted to promote. So I think this would be the right time that if they can supply and support exports also, then that also allows us, without hurting Indian customer, to get better margins and, like, set up a higher capacity. So I think anything which they do on that, on top of the PLI scheme, which they were already considering, would be really helpful.
Thank you very much. Anjani, over to you for your comments around latest positive developments, and in case you have some policy suggestions. Anyway, I think you have got the a lot of support already from government, but I would like you to talk about these.
No, so we've got generic support, what the state government would give for any industry, probably 5-10% here and there. But apart from that, we are still like any other component manufacturer to get any benefit from the central government. That is still in the draft, in the making. So I think this was a discussion I was having with one of a colleague from the cell manufacturing, that it is important for the government to give incentives to the cell manufacturer, but at the same time impose and give clarity on what duties are going to be levied in the coming years, so that the cell manufacturers are also prepared, and the discussions with the component manufacturers are in those lines, that okay, today you're getting your material from X supplier, but come 2 years, come 3 years, what are the restrictions looking like? And that clarity is very important. So government needs to take that into consideration and uh, implement or get out policies accordingly.
Oh, really amazing, really. Let me summarize before I take up the questions. So that the takeaways are like there are the positive developments. There are already two companies, National Energy and Ola, doing the cell manufacturing in India. And also there are 2-3 more, which probably are going to start the production very soon. Second is in terms of, I think, customer support and policy somehow can enable this customer support. Third is positive development in terms of the international companies because of the decoupling of the China. In terms of policy suggestions, there are mainly PLI for if we can have a PLI for upstream manufacturing, which can help scaling up the supplies to cell manufacturing in India. Export incentives, I think this is very important. Export incentives, if can be considered, are going to positively help the industry. And then clarity on the PMP, maybe the phase manufacturing program, how it is going to look like in long term, because the updates has not happened since last many years, as well as the domestic taxes, maybe GST, etc. So these are some of the takeaways. Thank you very much, all of you.